sur l'ordi. Bon, voilà, normalement, voilà, on est censé avoir du son. On va essayer aussi ici. Voilà, ok. Donc théoriquement, on devrait. Par contre, je sais plus c'est quelle page. C'est l'idée de réunion, c'est ça? Hop.
Parce que j'aimerais te parler, mais on m'entend pas.
Il essaye?
Ouais.
Ah, nous, je sais que tout à l'heure, on a eu ça avec le Zoom. Il nous entend ou pas? Là, ce serait peut-être mieux, parce qu'en tout cas, il y a la caméra de retour. Oui, d'accord. Il nous entend. Ok. Alors, ça doit venir de... Ça doit peut-être venir de ton... Ouais, si tu as la caméra, tu vas peut-être avoir le micro qui va venir avec. Non. Sauf que je connais pas Zoom. Donc, comment... Bah si, ouais, si... Parce qu'en tout cas, on a du son de l'ordi, quoi qu'il arrive. Mais c'est que avec Zoom qu'on n'en a pas.
Donc, attends, j'ai déjà vu ça. Il y a un réglage dans Zoom.
D'accord.
J'ai déjà vu cette histoire-là.
Ce serait dans quoi?
Ici en bas à droite.
En bas à gauche, ouais.
Sélectionner le son que vous avez.
Sortir le son.
Sur la flèche à côté.
Là, on est activé.
Sur la flèche à côté.
Ouais.
Pour vérifier sur quelle carte son tu renvoies ton son.
L'intervenant. Ah bah alors du coup, on va le mettre sur le clic share. Et là, vas-y.
Je pense que là, c'est bon.
Je crois, ouais. Ouais.
C'est bon.
Ok.
Ah ouais, c'est bon, justement, c'est bon.
Ouais, nickel. Alors c'est juste que lui, son son... Est-ce qu'on peut régler le test du haut-parleur? Les paramètres audio, est-ce qu'on peut régler le niveau? Voilà. Niveau de sortie. Hop, vas-y.
Allô?
Ouais, nickel.
Bonjour.
On va être... Ok, et notre micro, tu l'entends bien? Le micro de l'ordi?
Oui.
Ouais,
Oui.
ok. Donc je pense que le mieux, voilà, serait de lui retranscrire s'il y a des questions.
Ok, ça marche.
Et voilà, et peut-être qu'avec le son de la salle, il l'entendrait, ça dépend pour du coup, il faudra faire attention à ce qu'il n'y ait pas de boucle en fait. Il ne faudrait pas que le son qu'on a ici, qui sort de ses enceintes à lui, qui revienne chez nous.
Ouais, sinon ça va vite.
C'est ça.
Ok,
Ça, c'est bon. Ok, bon, je suis dans le coin si jamais.
Ok, ça marche. Merci. T'as mon numéro de toute façon? Ouais. Si même de son. Ok, ça marche, merci. Tu peux commencer si tu veux. Ouais, c'est bon.
Okay. Hello. Hi, I hope you can hear me all right. I'm sorry I'm not here today. I got stuck because of the virus in Singapore, but I'm really happy to present at EthCC. It's a really nice conference. I was there last year. I want to thank the organizers for arranging the Zoom meeting. And if you cannot see the slides well enough, you can also find them on github.com/ethereum/rig. Okay, let's dive in. I called this talk Rig Bouillabaisse. So this is a bouillabaisse. It's a stew, fish stew from the south of France, and it has lots of things dumped in there. And I think this talk is also kind of a lot of things, but I want to give like an introduction to what the RIG is, Robust Incentives Group, and I want to show you like a few things that we've been working on in the last couple of months. So the Robust Incentives Group is a new research team at Ethereum, which is really focused on everything that has a strategic flavor. And by strategic, I mean that we look at situations where you have like a set of stakeholders, and they have to make decisions, and they make decisions so that they optimize their own payoffs. their payoffs are affected by what other people are also deciding. So I'll give a few examples to be less general, but you can already see that it's a very wide model, and it's actually a model we can use to study protocol security, but also decentralized applications, so from a strategic point of view. So what do we mean by incentives? So the I of the rig. We really mean that the methodology we use is based on these three, let's say, academic fields. The first one is game theory, which you have probably heard about if you have worked a bit with blockchain. And it's the idea that you're specifying players who have a certain set of moves, actions, and their moves give them some payoffs that depend on what other players are doing. And the point of game theory is to try and analyze and answer the question, well, what should I do in a strategic situation? So it's very descriptive academic theory. And then you have mechanism design, which is sometimes called inverse game theory, which is, it takes the, let's say, game theory from another point of view. So you start from the end, you say, hey, here's like an outcome that I like, a situation, like a social situation or a social configuration that I like, and let me try and design game so that players or people who are interacting with it can achieve that outcome that I like. And then there's a final strand, which is relatively new compared to the other two, algorithmic game theory, which probably started around 1999. We care about designing these mechanisms, we care about finding the games that give us good outcomes, but we also care that the mechanisms are computationally tractable, meaning that they can be achieved by agents who are naturally bounded. And by bounded, you can think of it, for instance, as agents are running algorithms and they don't have as much computational power or as much storage as they want. They're still trying to make the best decisions to optimize their outcomes. So this is sort of a general idea of where we are locating ourselves in the academic space, let's say. And then what do we mean by robust? Robustness comes from the fact that these decentralized protocols that we're looking at, the current protocol of Ethereum, the protocol of Bitcoin, tomorrow ETH2, they're really complex. And they're not just complex because they are like a complex protocol, they're complex because they are a mishmash of many different protocols kind of stuck together. And this complexity just naturally compounds. And so you can have very complex behavior, emergent behaviors, and you want a protocol to survive in any or most of these conditions. You want a protocol to be able to withstand attacks, to withstand, let's say, uncertain conditions. And to think about robustness is actually very different in decentralized protocols than it is if you were doing what I call in vacuum game theory. So if you know game theory, you might know, let's say, the prisoner's dilemma or these kinds of game. They're really abstract settings. But in decentralized protocols, there's a lot of things we don't have. Like first, which are our players? So we want our protocols to be robust against civil behavior. It's really like the point of proof of work. Which is a game. So we also want our protocol to be able to withstand network delays, adversarial manipulations. We're not sure that all our players are experiencing the same thing, the same state of the protocol. You know? And finally, which are the payoffs? So do we only care about the payoffs that players are getting, denominated in ETH or denominated in BTC? I'm going to argue later that it is probably not the case. We also care that players are living in a larger economic space than just the protocol itself. So this is what we mean by robustness. We really want to make sure our protocols withstand a lot of different things. And finally, what do we mean by group? I think a very interesting over focus of the RIG is to try and develop outreach, education, but also awareness that these strategic questions exist. And we try to formalize our efforts along three tracks. First, to find the resources that allow us to understand these questions and to find the patterns that make sense for blockchains. And more specifically, to look at existing research, and one that is, every day doesn't be better, and study the applicability for Ethereum. And finally, talk to a broad audience about open questions that we have, and try to onboard more incentives-oriented people. So people who are thinking in these strategic terms, who can look at the economics and the game theory of the protocol. So this was like a brief introduction to what the RAID is. I'll spend most of the talk talking about incentives in NIF2, which is what we are currently looking at. If you attended the workshop this morning, you already know most of this, but I'm just going to give you like a 101 on the NIF2 incentives. In NIF2, we have validators. And validators are the ones who make the network run. They're getting the blocks, they help like, produce more data, and we want to make sure that we incentivize good behavior. And what do we mean by good behavior? We mean that validators are expected to vote and make correct votes and on time. So we are voting with the Casper gadget. We also expect them to create blocks when we ask them to do so, and we expect them to do it timely. We expect them to look around and check if other validators are behaving nice, and if they aren't, validators can report it, so they should look for these stashable offenses. And then in later phases, we'll also expect validators to help finalize shards. And their role will be more complex than it currently is in phase 0. And so how do the incentives work? So validators lock up some kind of stake, a deposit, denominated in ETH, and we try to make sure that behavior will hurt these deposits. They will lose money if they behave badly. If they behave well, we give them some kind of return. And it's a very simple rule. It's just rewards and punishment. But what can we expect? This is what we want to try and answer. And I would like to argue that to really understand, okay, what can we expect from a protocol, we can divide our economic analysis in two different tracks. The first one has to do with, let's say, protocol level stability, meaning that we specify some desired validator behavior, something that, oh, I wish validators would behave like this. And then we specify some rewards. We say, if you do this, if this is the outcome that is happening, you will get that reward. If you behave badly, you will get like a penalty. And we hope somehow that the reward that we define, the game that we're defining, is inducing the behavior that we want. And I'll show some example that sometimes it doesn't. On the other hand, there's a different way to interpret, let's say, economic analysis to understand at the asset level what is the security of the chain. And it's definitely a less tangible notion, and you can tell by how hotly debated it is on crypto Twitter. But maybe a guiding intuition would be that we would like attacks on the chain to be optimally painful to the attacker. So we want to prevent these attacks, or if we cannot, at least make them as bad as possible for whoever is attacking the chain. And of course, recover from them. And if we have both, we'll have a really nice VLS, lots of things in the plate. I'll introduce first this idea of protocol space. You can think of the space of ETH2 proof-of-stake protocols with the FFG gadget as a really big space, where the space is defined by the parameters of the protocol, and one instance is determined by these parameters. So which parameters am I talking about? You can think of, for instance, the minimum deposit, the reward schedule, meaning what do I give to validators when they behave nicely, the time to exit or to get your deposit back once you don't want to validate again. Also things like the issuance curve, which defines the return on your deposit that you get for behaving nicely. The thing I'm picturing on the right is taken from the post that I wrote with Sasha on hacking research, where you can actually drag these parameters around and see how the rewards for the validators are changing. So this is really what we mean when we mean like a protocol space. It's a very large space, many different parameters, and you can pick one protocol out of this space by just setting some of these numbers. The first thing that I argue we really want to have for our protocol is we want it to be stable. We want the expected the desired behavior. And if this is happening, that's what we call incentive compatibility. We assume, we say here that, well, it's rational for a validator to act truthfully, to do the thing that we want the validator to do. And so we have this very large space, big P, and now we can already restrict it a bit and say, well, in this large space, we actually have a smaller space where the parameters make sense. The parameters will make the protocol incentive compatible for the validators. And I take this notion of stability from a paper written by a team here in Singapore, which actually looks at many other different facets of protocol definition. And I encourage you to check this paper as well. It's the Presto framework. Okay, so I said I would give you some examples of instability. The most famous example is selfish mining. In Bitcoin, in proof of work, we would really like miners to release the block that they find, and we want them to release them as soon as they find it. But what Ite Eyal and Evin Gunsira found is that with enough mining power, it's a better response for me as a miner to sometimes not release the block that I find and keep it to myself for some time and hope that I can extend this chain and then waste everybody else's time by saying, hey, now I have the longest chain, so you have to follow it. So this is an example of instability because this is validator behavior that we would not want to see, but that it's rational for them to do. I can make my payoff better by doing this. And we actually have a more recent example in Tezos. It's a paper by Neuder and Al, where you can see in this paper that the timing of a block release can increase the payoffs of the validator. So I can be strategic about what I'm doing and not follow the protocol and do better than what I should be doing. And now I want to argue about this bridge from protocol stability to asset security. So we restricted already the protocol space to a smaller space of rational protocols, let's say. But we mustn't forget that these protocols, they do live in a larger economic space. I really like this article by Hasu in CoinDesk. It's very provocative, but he says, well, concentration among miners isn't going to break Bitcoin. And the key to understand this is to really understand that, well, of course I care about maximizing the amount of Bitcoin that I get, but I'm also going to think about what my attack, if I'm attacking the chain, or if I'm colluding or doing something that's out of protocol, what would that impact the chain in more, in the larger economic terms? Like, is it really rational for me to, let's say, crash the price of Bitcoin by doing an attack, rather than just keep mining honestly and getting the Bitcoin rewards at the price that they are currently trading? So I want to argue here that we can't really understand rational behavior of validators if we just look at the in-protocol behavior. And so, given that, we would like then to understand, well, which are the parameters that we should set for our protocol. And I want to argue that, well, we're always trying to optimize something, and this something would be, let's say, the security. And we know that there are trade-offs between increasing the issuance or decreasing the issuance again. And we know that these trade-offs, they mean something and they should impact how we set our parameters. And we really want to try and write them down. But actually, the rig so far has been more focused on looking at protocol stability for ETH2. We've tried to pin down a mathematical specification of validation game, so using game theory and algorithmic game theory. And we've also started to produce a simulation environment where we can test these validators' behaviors. We call it the beacon runner, and I'm going to talk about this in the next few minutes. For this beacon runner, we adopt the view of blockchains as controlled dynamical systems. Dynamical systems is a very well-researched field of mathematics, and we basically start from a state, which you can think, well, the state is a chain of blocks, it's the current state of the blockchain. I can update my state by adding a new block to the chain, but it's also controlled in the sense that it's not just planets moving around with no one at the wheel, it's the users and the validators participate in block formation. They add their own transactions, and these transactions are processed. So the state of the chain is of course going to depend on what people are doing with it as well. So the beacon runner, you can find it on the rig repository on GitHub. It's a CAD wrap of the ETH2 specs, which is really focused on validator behavior and incentives. And what is CAD? It's a really nice new Python framework, which is focused on simulating these complex token dynamics. You can also do more than just token dynamics, but it really abstracts this idea of dynamical systems and help you build from simple rules very complex simulations. You can really study this phenomena in depth. If you're interested, you should definitely check Griff workshop on Thursday morning. That will be at 11 a.m. And you will get to spend an hour looking at CAD. I'll give a few ideas first. Why do we want to simulate in the first place? Why do we care about having these simulation environments? Well, I've talked about complex behavior, but we often have very simple micro rules. So we want to be able to define these rules and then see what emerges. And this is what we usually call agent-based models. So we define validators' behavior, we put them in a simulation environment, we let it run for some time, and we hope that what we observe is what we expect. This is going to be a very interesting clue to the stability of the protocol first. But we also want our simulations to be as close as possible to the real system. And CAD is really helpful because you can just take the specs as is, you don't modify the code at all, and you can wrap the specs around it and use CAD as the simulation environment. And finally, it's very extensible. And we really want our simulation environment to be used to model even more complex phenomena. So there's been some talk about a new paper on competition between on-chain lending and staking. If validators find that it's better for them to put their money in DeFi, why would they stake in the first place, right? So we would like, it's a very complex phenomenon, and we would like to be able to analyze it using simulations. We also want to understand how validators may move from different validation opportunities. They might want to run their own node. They could also delegate their stake to some pool, or keep it in an exchange that will offer some return. It's very complex. We want to know, well, what are the dynamics of expropriation? What can we expect validators will do in the future? And we also might want to be able to simulate the dynamics of recovery from chain attacks to understand how these attacks, how do we recover from them. I noticed that I'm running a bit out of time, so I will skip this. But do check the slides online on the wiki. And I want to finish with a few more things that we will be looking at very soon. Other incentives of ETH. The first really interesting new thing in it is this EIP 1559, which defines a new transaction fee market. I use this image. It's taken from the gantries in Singapore, so you have to pay when you're in the car to access the central business district. It's called ERP, but I modified it to EIP 1559. And so this transaction fee market will replace the first price auction, which is notoriously suboptimal and also hard to analyze theoretically. And so we expect that with a new client developed by Vulcanize, we'll be able to run some tests and simulate and try and get an idea, well, what will be the market dynamics of EIP 1559, and is it a robust protocol in the first place? So there'll be some work to do on this. Another thing that we're really excited to look at is live client incentives. The full ETH2 vision will depend on live clients exchanging proofs of availability of the data, but also that the data is correct. We already know how these proofs can be created. You can check this paper by Al-Bassam and Vitalik, notably. But the question of who is producing these proofs and who is paying for their disseminations, like I have to, as a full node, I have to run my server and pay for the cost of me sending these proofs to the live clients. So where does the money come? This live clients protocol is going to introduce market dynamics. We want to ask if they are efficient or if they are low. Okay, that's it. Thank you for listening to the talk. It's the first time I do it remotely, so I hope that it went okay. You can check more resources on our repo. You can also find me on Twitter if you have comments or questions. I would be really happy to talk with you. Thank you.
Do you do questions? Do you do questions? Do you do questions?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry.
All right. So, based on your research, hi, and thank you for the presentation. Based on your research, what is your assumption regarding the annual rate of return for validator? I know there's this common assumption that 20 million ETH would be staked, but the staking ratio in network like Tezos is as high as nearly 80% currently. So in a scenario where you have, large custodian exchanges offering those staking facility like they currently do for POS chains to their existing enormous customer base, and we reach, staking ratio of like that is higher than 80% or 90%, what's your, do you have any specific opinion on this, and what's your projection as well for that?
It's a good question. I think I try to stay away from saying, oh, that number would be good, this number would be good. I'd like to be able to, let's say, find some kind of method that would tell us how to find this number in the first place, and I think you noticed like the trade-offs, right? So the issuance is higher if we have like more validators. We understand that there should be like some kind of pressure on the price. We understand that security will depend on, of course, the more validators we have staking, the better. But at the same time, it means the validators who are not staking, is there some kind of phenomenon where they are losing value because of inflation? I mean, it's a very tricky like question, and it makes all, let's say, the economic mechanisms of a chain kind of interact together. So definitely we want to look at what happens when people are staking, but we expect that this should also impact even the transaction fee market to some extent. The more people are staking, the higher the rates are, the less likely I am maybe to spend something. So there are many like complex interactions. I think, and I really hope to be working on this more once I think I've thrown around like protocol stability. But I would like to find some procedure that would tell me, okay, these are the trade-offs that we have. This is the model that I have of how prices are moving or how the transaction fee market is impacting on staking. Or I want to be able to write them down. And then I want to be able for these things to tell me, well, how should I set my issuance curve, or what should I expect the numbers to be. So I know it's kind of like a non-answer, but I think it's a bit hard to say, oh, I really wish I had 10% to target, or I want like 2 million ETH paid. At the moment, these numbers they're helpful like to get some kind of orders of magnitude, but they might also be misleading in that we're focusing on a particular outcome rather than a specific way of deriving it.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
Does that answer you?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, I think. One additional question then is based on the mechanical design approach, sort of to how you model that approach of token issuance and the reward function in ETH2. And it's related to the decentralization of the network. So I know we want to incentivize for high uptime. We want to incentivize for as much as we can to be staked, to guarantee the security of the network. But have you taken into account or considered putting into your model incentivizing people from moving away from cloud instances? So for instance, I read this figure like today or yesterday that stated that 60% of full nodes operating on Ethereum right now are actually based on AWS. Is that a concern to you? And do you think there could be some consideration for hard coding those rules into the protocol, saying, you know, you'd get higher reward from running a full node from your home rather than, you know, just using some instance? I want to know, like, yeah, what's your opinion on that, and if any work has been undertaken?
Yeah, so I think there's maybe like two points. The first is that to some extent, I think because the protocols are already quite complex, you might want your protocol to be agnostic to how it's run. So you're encoding in your protocol some reward rules that say, oh, if I notice that you're using like AWS or something, you're already kind of biasing your protocol to some extent. Actually, it makes me think of like this Vitalik piece on credible mechanisms. Like you might not want to say, oh, this is the outcome that I expect. Like you might want at protocol level to say, well, here is like how the rewards function, and then possibly try to find a different mechanism on top to incentivize, let's say, not using AWS. There's one thing, so if you check the specs of ETH2, there is some kind of penalty for, let's say, correlated attacks or correlated bad behavior. So when too many people are doing the wrong thing at the same time, more of their share of the deposit is lost. And one idea behind having this reward is also to say that, oh, if you have located all of your nodes on the same server and your server crashes, you're going to lose proportionally more of your deposit. And so this was put inside the mechanism so that it does incentivize people to run, like, let's say, different things, to have, like, at least different versions, so that not everything crashes at the same time, in which case, like, the penalty is much higher. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, thanks very much for the answers.
Yeah, thank you. A good question.
Hi, Dimitri here. Related to the last part, I think it's a bit like, it feels a bit like similar to getting ASIC resistance in the network, and that you have like Cloudflare resistance or Bezos resistance into the network. But regardless of that, I know you touched it slightly, but I just want to hear your opinion about incentives on the security side of things versus incentives that are now running on the DApp side, on the DeFi space and stuff like that. And you see Compound and stuff going to 7% interest rates. Are you factoring that in when you model? I know it's very hard to factor in. It looks and feels a bit like an externality to the protocol incentives. But is there any methodology you apply there? Like
So, I mean, yeah, as you point out, like, these things are really hard to formalize. I'm hoping simulations are a better tool to look at these questions, but more specifically on this idea of, let's say I'm a validator, I manage some kind of portfolio of assets, and I decide to allocate my assets between staking or between lending on Compound. Again, I would refer you, like, to this paper by Tarun Chitra, which is linked in the slides. But yeah, I think one conclusion that Tarun has been talking about for some time is that the protocol should have some kind of awareness of what the chain is proposing in terms of returns on the asset. I don't think it's like an unreasonable idea, but to link actually to the previous question, it's kind of uncomfortable that your protocol needs to depend on some sort of oracle of what is happening on the chain. Because again, I think the idea is really to have a protocol be as unbiased and as, almost like blind by design of what is happening. But this raises very serious questions. And I think the paper by Tarun makes a really good point to say that these are actually things we should be looking at, and they should probably impact somehow the design. I'm not certain how yet. I'm not sure it's so easy to model as well, but I really do hope that doing simulations will clarify at least some of these points. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone?
Sure.
All right, that looks like it's it. Yeah. Interesting stuff. All right, peace out, dude. Well done. Yeah.
Thank you.